Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
So Johnny Van Manziel did a podcast interview with Logan Paul. And in that interview, I think the clip that popped out to a lot of people, that a lot of people wanted to talk about was the clip where he's talking trash about the city of Cleveland, basically saying that it aided his depression. Basically, he's been vocal about this. He has made his point clear for years that the city of Cleveland and him was just not a good fit, right? For whatever reason. And the reasons are obvious for why they weren't a good fit with Johnny Manziel at that time and probably ever, right? And that's something to discuss, I guess. But it's not really the main thing I took away from that video, right? Because I don't really care what happened with Johnny Manziel anymore in 2014. I don't care what went wrong, who was to blame. It's ancient history at this point. It's over 10 years ago. Who cares? What, am I going to be mad at Johnny Manziel in 2025? Like, why? What purpose does that serve? He doesn't like the city of Cleveland. The city of Cleveland is not a big fan of Johnny Manziel. And he serves as this cautionary tale for every single quarterback that the Cleveland Browns draft. And that's what I want to focus on, right? Because I think the most annoying thing about the Cleveland Browns drafting Johnny Manziel wasn't Johnny Manziel's actual career. His career was short. It was a fart in the wind, right? It was like 2 years out. It wasn't anything. It wasn't this catastrophic thing, even though you can make the argument that Johnny Manziel was the reason you didn't retain Kyle Shanahan. But if we're going to be honest here, Mike Pettin was never going to hold on to Kyle Shanahan as the offensive coordinator for more than a year or two, right? Before Mike Pettin probably got fired. Like, that wasn't going to last long. This idea that we would have had like Kyle Shanahan as our coach and it would have changed everything, it's far-fetched to me. And, you know, it's too long ago to really be that focused on. The thing that annoys me about Johnny Manziel's existence in the Cleveland Browns story is that every time the Cleveland Browns ever take a quarterback, we always end up somehow talking about Johnny Manziel, right? Like, no matter what it is, there's something you can find from the guy that reminds you of Johnny Manziel. And then we're talking about this is another Manziel. Remember when it happened with Baker Mayfield? Like, everybody freaked out about Baker Mayfield being Johnny Manziel because he ran away from cops, and he was short. He was white. They made the connection, right? Like, oh, it's Johnny Manziel. They even went to the point to have Johnny Manziel. I don't know if y'all remember this, but like Fox produced this thing during, I think it was the game where Baker Mayfield started, like his first real start. They produced this whole video package with Johnny Manziel where he's writing a letter to Baker Mayfield telling him what he needs to avoid going forward and all this kind of stuff, right? So with Baker Mayfield, this thing happened. And now I've seen the parallels be drawn with Johnny Manziel of some of these Browns fans with like Shador. I don't think that's a good parallel to draw, like, at all. Shador's issues on the football field, not what Johnny's were. And honestly, Shador's much more developed of an actual quarterback than Johnny Manziel ever was, plays more in structure than Johnny Manziel ever did. Completely different players on the field, right? You can argue Johnny Manziel was a superior college player than Shador because he won the Heisman Trophy, which is a fair argument to make. But also, if we're talking about translatable skills to the NFL, Shador is clearly superior to Johnny in that aspect. But I think the one area where people kind of draw a parallel to that's a little bit more justified is the fame part of it, right? Johnny Manziel was unique in college football, not because he was a short guy who could run around and throw the football. That's happened before in college football. It was the sheer celebrity of Johnny Manziel that was completely unique to anything that we've ever seen. And the celebrity of Shedeur Sanders has been something that has been criticized, something that I think attributed to his draft slide that made him fall far beyond anywhere that was reasonable, given what his pre-draft tape looked like coming out of Colorado. Again, I had like a late first grade on him, and that was pretty much where most people were with Shedeur, was like a mid to late first round grade, depending on how desperate teams were, would depend on where he went in the first. And he ends up going in the fifth. And I think a lot of that had to do with nervousness about the celebrity that Shedeur Sanders carries. Because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if there's been a player in college football that's been as famous as Johnny Manziel was, other than Shedeur. Like, there have been players who have been very popular because they're really good, but Shedeur is legitimately famous. Like, there are people who get mad at me or, watch these Browns videos every day that never watch anything football related, right? Like, they don't care about football, but they care about Shedeur. That's the level of fame that he's bringing in. And that's not necessarily or inherently a bad thing, but that is where you can draw the parallel. And I think listening to that interview, and if you want to go listen to the interview, it's on the I'm Impulsive YouTube page. It's Logan Paul's podcast. Your mileage may vary with Logan Paul and Johnny Manziel. I understand that some of y'all ain't gonna have too much time for that. The Sparks Notes version of that podcast, and why I thought it was interesting enough to talk about, because the Cleveland bashing stuff, okay, whatever. Johnny's gonna bash Cleveland. That's what it is. But what I thought was interesting was Johnny talking about how the celebrity kind of caught him off guard and he got carried away with it. And I think that part of it is the most important thing to talk about, because that's where it gives me a lot more hope that, not hope. I don't want to say hope. That's where I think this thing is a lot different for Shedeur Sanders, and why I think there's a more realistic chance for this to not be a Johnny Manziel thing with Shedeur. I know a lot of people are concerned about that with Shedeur. Again, you're a Browns fan, really famous football players in Cleveland. It has not worked out historically. We're talking about Andre Rison, who was super famous outside of football. That was not successful. You can argue that his free agency signing was the straw that broke the camel's back and eventually led to the Cleveland Browns leaving Cleveland. You can fast forward to Odell Beckham, obviously Johnny Manziel. We've had our fair share of very famous players on the Cleveland Browns, and it has not worked out, which is why I think there's so much skepticism amongst the veterans of this fan base that have lived through all of that when they see somebody as famous as Shedeur. I think Shedeur is a little bit different, though, right? And I don't know what Shedeur's skill set's going to translate to in the NFL game. I have hope that he could be a pretty good NFL player. Again, I thought he was a first-round pick, so I'm thrilled that they got him in the fifth round. But if you're worried about the celebrity of it, I think what's different about this and every other time it's happened with Cleveland is the celebrity aspect of Shedeur Sanders' life. It's just not anything new to Shedeur Sanders like it was for Johnny Manziel. This is not something Shedeur has to learn to balance. He's already done that, right? If that's what you're concerned about, right? The fact that he's a celebrity, the fact that he is famous, I don't think that's what you should be overly concerned. It seems like, from everything I can see, Shedeur works really hard. Shedeur has a good understanding of the work-life balance between doing things because he's famous and because he has access to it, and also doing what he needs to do on the football field, right? Like, that's something he has demonstrated in college and in so far in the NFL. Again, we got long ways to go with his career, but it's something he's demonstrated that he knows how to do. He's never been somebody who's been caught up or had these reports out that he was out all night and hung over for a game. He seems like a pretty prepared guy. And it seems like Coach Prime has done a really good job of helping his kids manage that. Like, yeah, there are things that they can take advantage of because they do have access to money and people with a lot of money and with a lot of access to opportunities. Is why you see Shedeur Sanders with really good sponsorship deals, really good commercial deals. The same thing with his brother Shiloh, who got to play Dion in Power, I believe, right? Like, that is part of what they get because they are Sanders kids, right? And Dion has introduced them to that, but he also introduced it to him with balance. Like, he's very experienced. Shedeur's been famous since he was like 12. He's been on reality TV. So I don't think that's an issue. I think he's actually coming into this, and it's going to be more of an adjustment for NFL personnel to get used to the idea that this guy understands that he's famous, understands how to balance that at 22 years old versus something that Shedeur has to make the adjustment to because he's been dealing with fame since before he was going through puberty. Like, he's ultra experienced with this. He might be helpful to teach other people how to deal with that fame if it comes because he's been famous for so long. Hell, it was probably something helpful for Travis Hunter when the fame came for Travis Hunter in a way that it's kind of always been there for Shedeur Sanders. So listening to that Johnny Manziel podcast, again, if you can get through the whole aspect of it where he kind of like low-key blames some of his failure on the fact that he wasn't excited to be in Cleveland, he would have failed anywhere where he was drafted. I think there is something to glean of like listening to exactly what went wrong with him and why it went wrong. And, you know, if you want to use Johnny Manziel's the ultimate Cleveland Browns quarterback cautionary tale, and you're trying to draw parallels with whatever quarterback that the Cleveland Browns draft and saying to yourself, that's something that Johnny dealt with, we got to be worried about it with this guy. The fame aspect that you could draw the parallel with him and Shedeur, I don't really think that's there. I think Shedeur is much better equipped to handle being famous than Johnny Manziel ever was, and even still to this day, right? I think he's more equipped to handle that fame at his young age versus Johnny Manziel, who is what at this point has to be like 32 years old. So that's my thoughts on that, right? Because I've heard a lot of people sound off about it, and I get why Browns fans would be concerned about a famous player. Like, it's been one of these things that's never worked out for Cleveland. And I don't blame Browns fans for being nervous about that. You know, the famous players aren't usually the ones that work out for us. Like, you could be popular, but when I'm saying famous, I'm talking about mainstream popularity. Like, again, Andre Rison was dating Left Eye and had his house burnt down. Everybody in America knew who Andre Rison was, whether they cared about football or not. Odell Beckham, he goes to the Met Gala, right? Like, he's a famous celebrity who also played football. You know, Johnny Manziel was in Drake songs, like, was torn with Drake at that point of his life, was famous outside the scope of football, right? Whereas Myles Garrett is famous, but like, nobody random who doesn't care about football is going to know who Myles Garrett is, right? Like, this is different from a popular player. We're talking about a famous player. And Shedeur is famous in that same way. I think he's different than all of those other cases, right? Andre Rison, he was just not at that point where he was going to be a productive player anyway. I think he was in the middle of his fall off. Odell Beckham, a lot went wrong with Odell Beckham, right? Lack of chemistry with Baker Mayfield, the reliance of chemistry on Baker Mayfield. Also, not really at a point in his life where he was willing to give up the New York of it all because he was really attached to that kind of stuff. And then who is the last example of this? Johnny Manziel, which obviously a million reasons why that went wrong. Shedeur's a little bit different. And also, like, of all of those guys, he seems to actually enjoy being in Cleveland. Like, I don't think he dislikes it. He seems to be out there doing a lot of great charity work. You know, if that's your main basis for disliking him, I think that's misguided, right? Like if that's why you don't think he'd be successful and that's the main sauce you're putting on it, I think you should really reevaluate how you feel about Shedeur Sanders, right? And I get it, even if you're like beef with Shedeur Sanders is you don't like his fans, please just ignore it, right? Like I'm being fair about Shedeur Sanders and they get mad at me all the fucking time. I don't really care, right? Like it's not gonna stop me from evaluating or enjoying somebody who I think is gonna have a decent career if they have it. That's my kind of thoughts on it, right? That's where my mind went after listening to that Johnny Manziel interview is, okay, where are the parallels? Where does it make people nervous? And that's kind of something I landed on. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, what you think of it, right? Is it the fame that worries you with Shedeur? Is it something that is kind of in the background that you haven't really thought about, but this video might have made you kind of address that maybe it is the fame that makes you worried about him? Or is it something more serious about him that makes you concerned about him? That's unique to him as a football player. Like he can have his critiques, but I think he's as good as a 5th round pick as you could ever have, right? If we're talking about worries about him and his tape is well beyond 5th round pick quality. Honestly, I thought it was like 1st round, 2nd round quality. So that's not really I don't really think that's a good holdback of it. But let me know what you think. If you are a Sanders fan and you're willing to be reasonable, like what is it about him that you feel like people underestimate? And if you aren't a Sanders fan, what is it about him that is related to football that actually concerns you? Let's have those conversations in the comment section down below. Have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.